Welcome back to Market It with Atma, where we share the tips, tools, and strategies to help your business be successful. I'm your host, Dory, and today we have on the show a very exciting guest for me, Mr. Jamal Robinson, the founder of 720 Astrology. Welcome, Jamal.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited about this visit today. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got into astrology and how long you've been in business right now?
I got into astrology through the age-old school of failure. So I had a very successful business prior to being an astrologer. I actually used to be a competitive bodybuilder and successful personal trainer, had a gym and all that.
Wow.
And as my elementary librarian told me one time, she said, "Jamal, you're getting too big for your britches."
Which might have been true, right?
And I probably had a tendency to do that. And that probably was what happened with the fitness business. I got too fixated on growing and may have lost some of the focus, but I think it was intentional as far as in the higher realms because I needed to fail to put me on a new path of what was more aligned with my actual purpose.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of us learn like that. You either grow through it or you get defeated, right?
Right. So it kind of led me down this road of wanting to figure out who I was more and why certain things were happening. And I definitely wasn't looking for astrology, but I ran into it.
Okay.
And so that was about 12 years ago.
Wow.
But I actually didn't start practicing till about 5 years ago professionally.
Okay.
So I've been in this gestation phase for most of that time. And so then life experiences coupled in with just studying the book stuff with astrology has come together to make me who I am today as an astrologer.
And you found success in that. So did you have a mentor or someone who encouraged you to look into astrology, or did you find out on your own through research that some of this is just lining up?
Yeah, I didn't have technically a mentor, but I think life is a mentor in itself. So I've had people show up who may have not known that I even existed, but I saw them and I picked up data from them and I picked a little something up over here. But I had mentors show up after I got involved to let me know that I was on the right path.
Right.
I had an astrologer 2 years ago who was on her deathbed.
Oh my.
And she found me. Here's a testament to Trinity, Advent Trinity, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Because I have my Google face or placement or presence, she went Googling for an astrologer that she could bequeath her library to.
Wow.
And she found me. She was in Wisconsin, and she found me, and we ended up talking on the telephone about astrology and the condition she was in. She said, time is of the essence. I probably only have about 2 weeks left on this planet. She was right. So we set something up with her son where I could send them some money to mail me 5 boxes of books.
Wow.
So that's the type of mentorship I've had. Like, it's been ethereal.
Yeah, almost like the universe is just aligning with your presence and your purpose. That is incredible. So you have developed a website, obviously with the Advent Trinity, and we're helping you with all of those different variables of your digital marketing. Would you say that your website has been a big tool in helping you expand your audience, or what digital tools, social media, things like that, have you been more successful in receiving response from?
The website is key because it's my digital business card.
Yes.
And it distinguishes, differentiates me from my, if you want to call it competitors, I'd say contemporaries.
Okay.
A lot of people, and this is no knock, but a lot of people will go and use Wix or Squarespace and And those type of template sites are a lot better than they used to be.
Mm-hmm.
But as an Aquarian sun, I always want to be a little different from the herd.
Right.
So I said, you know what? I want somebody to build a site that separates me from the others.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that was beyond my skill set. And I wanted some expertise around, well, how do you market yourself and how do you get more visible? And so that has been a very key piece in my business. Also, sweat equity.
Okay.
So being willing to put out information that you're not getting paid for immediately.
I like that.
Sharing books with people. A lot of people hoard information. They're scared they're going to give up some type of proprietary secrets or something, but you can't duplicate my essence. I can give you a book. I don't care about telling people where I got something from because I am the amalgamation of all that information I've taken in.
Right.
You can't duplicate that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think having that type of spirit where I don't mind sharing stuff, and having a professional face has been very helpful in my journey.
Right. It's almost like you're transparent, authentic.
Right.
With everything that comes from you. You take in and give exactly what you feel, which is amazing. So I'm curious, what inspired you to be a business owner, an entrepreneur? Because that in itself is hard. But there's a lot of skepticism in astrology. So what encouraged you to take that leap to start your own business?
I've never done well working for anybody. So the only job security I've ever had is when I've been my own boss. Right. I had a lawn care business before I left North Carolina. I had the personal training business here and now the astrology counseling business. So that's just in my DNA.
You're a natural entrepreneur.
Yeah. They say Aquarius is kind of the maverick, and so to a degree, I fit that stereotype some. But astrology is unique in that, oh boy, we were talking before we even started recording about I don't do pop astrology.
And I asked, what is pop astrology, right?
So pop astrology is like this, and this is no slight to anyone, but it's like, hi, Leo, today's going to be a great day for you for love. Your planets have a and Aquarius, today's your money day. That's what I call pop astrology. Real astrology is basically the foundation of Western psychology.
Interesting.
Now, one of the greatest lauded psychologists that we know of is Carl Jung. He was a depth psychologist. Now, Carl Jung spawned another generation of depth psychologists who came under him. Marie-Louise von Franz, James Hillman, Robert A. Johnson are some of the big names that I can recall. But there were a whole host of them. And they gave birth to another generation. Well, Robert A. Johnson says that one of the little known things about Jung was that he would secretly cast a chart for a client before seeing them. And when I say chart, I mean an astrological chart.
How do you go about that high level view?
So astrology is taking the age-old metaphysical science of as above, so below, as within, so without, which says that we are not disconnected from the heavens. And so that where these planetary bodies are at the moment that you went and took your first breath, that they were in conversation.
Interesting.
And then when you inhaled the conversation that they were having. And your life would become the template for that conversation. And you would have a choice. Fate would have it that they were at these positions when you took your first breath. But your will gives you the choice of how to respond to this fated situation. And astrology helps you see this master blueprint, which becomes the blueprint of your psyche, i.e. psychology.
I love that breakdown. It totally falls in line with what the falsehood of astrology I've heard, and the factual evidence of astrology I've heard, which is almost inspiring. It definitely touches on the credibility of what you do versus what the pop astrologists do. So becoming an entrepreneur in that space, how do you differentiate yourself from the pop astrology and yours to your audience? How do you get them to see your true depth?
You got to show them what you do.
Okay.
So the way you present the information, you have to be able to take complex things, one, and simplify them. And so that means you have to have a certain proficiency or a certain level of understanding to make it simple.
Okay.
And then you have to present it in an adult and mature way. And so to differentiate yourself, you just don't do what they do, and you just do what you do. And it's like, hey, this is when you talk about things like your shadow, everybody has one. And the shadow is where we stuff things down, bad things that happen to us, trauma we experience we can't talk about. We feel like we can't present it to the world. We don't want to be judged. That stuff gets stuffed down and it becomes what's called a shadow. And that shadow can be triggered. It can be triggered by something in traffic. It can be triggered by a coworker. It can be triggered by something on the news, and then it comes up. And it was like, we worked so hard to try to stuff this. So astrology gives voice to a shadow. So that's one thing which differentiates it from the pop stuff. Like, hey, let's deal with the real thing. Like, who is Pluto in mythology? Pluto is Hades.
Okay.
So Pluto in the Roman pantheon becomes Hades in the Greek pantheon.
Wow.
And Hades, with his other two brothers of Zeus and Poseidon, which Poseidon would be Neptune in Rome, and Zeus would be Jupiter. So Zeus, Poseidon, Hades. Zeus is a womanizer. Okay. Poseidon is it's also pretty proficient with the ladies. Hades is not. He lives in the underworld, and he wears a helmet that covers his eyes. So we have to use our sense of deduction to figure out, how does that apply to us in life?
Right.
Well, one, if your physical eyes are covered, you have to use your internal eyes, insight. And he lives in the underworld, and psychologically that represents our subconscious mind.
Absolutely.
Where all of our traumas are stuffed and pushed into. So when we have Pluto show up in the chart, it makes us see the ugly things we don't want to acknowledge.
Wow. And then what do you do with them?
By first, we have to acknowledge their presence, so that this is where Jung comes in with the depth psychology. How do we start to integrate what once we did not want to recognize? First step is to recognize it.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then you listen to it. So the little boy, Jamal, who may have stuffed stuff down, let him out of the basement and let him talk. And then maybe he can start to heal.
Right. It's almost like a therapeutic process.
Yeah.
And from what you explained just now, Greek mythology is a huge part of astrology.
Very much so.
Interesting.
It lays out the archetypal template.
Okay. Which makes so much sense. So what would you say your biggest challenge has been in having 720 astrology, whether it be your audience, whether it be creating the business? What would you say your biggest challenge
is that you have to be patient, because this is different from other businesses. So the things that work typically for others doesn't necessarily immediately work for this type of business. You gotta be willing to endure, because if you're not going to do the pop style,
right?
This style you have to allow to organically grow, but you got to also have other pieces in place, like my partnership with Advent Trinity.
Right.
But even with that, it's just because you have to educate people about what you actually do.
Right.
And then you got to put more messages out, and organically you got to service your clients, and then you get that return type of business, and then you get word of mouth. So it's
referencing the build, launch, grow, scale methodology that we've taken you to. You've gone through the build, scale with Advent Trinity, right? What phase of the process do you think you're in now?
Definitely in grow.
Okay.
So I'm in the growth process.
And what makes you feel that way?
Well, because the part of the building is just meeting up, framing how the website's going to be. We've even reskinned the website.
Wow.
So the we've done building and rebuilding, and the flexibility of being able to work with Atia and continuing to tweak things with the site. So it's constantly being rebuilt. I don't see them as build and you stop building. I think they're all overlapping.
Right. You can always improve, just like with time.
Right.
Things are going to change, but having a company, not just a company, people who are willing to customize things and really understand what you do, I feel is very important in any industry.
Right. Right.
Because if they don't understand, how can they expand your audience the way you want them to?
I respect experts and masters. I do not like being in communion with people who are not pursuing mastery. And so as a person who would consider himself to have achieved certain degrees of mastery in certain areas, I gravitate, or better yet, elevate. I don't want to go down. I want to go up.
Right.
I elevate towards people who display traits of mastery. See, I'm in Aquarius. Atia is a Gemini. So naturally air. She understands. She's about communication because Gemini rules over communication. And Aquarius is a communal, social sign. So when we're just speaking from a sun sign perspective, she's perfect for me to work with.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So because she's about details, and I respect that.
Right.
You know?
Does that help your creating relationships, whether it be with people or clients, knowing what their sign is and not conforming, but conforming your energy to understand where they're coming from?
Right. You want to know. So your sun sign is telling you how your life force is focused in this life.
Wow.
Because what does the sun do for us? It's our primary source of vitality.
That's right.
So whatever your sun sign is going to be, it's vital for you to be able to express through that lens.
Interesting.
So when you understand that, and like my 4 children, youngest is a Sagittarius.
Okay.
Next is a Pisces. Next is a Gemini. The oldest is a Pisces. Those are all mutable signs. So they force me to understand how to change and adapt.
Interesting.
They need to be able to move, and they need activities, and they need things to trigger their mind. And so understanding that, it allows for true compassion and compromise.
That is interesting. I can't imagine it not providing that, because in every one of those you mentioned, I think I have one of those in my family. And if I could understand their astrology and their sign better, I truly feel it would help me in not being so frustrated as a parent even, or as a community at my job, things like that. Like understanding those things is almost invaluable.
Astrology is, to piggyback on your word, invaluable for families and also businesses. I just did a reading for a group in North Carolina, kind of like a team building for their company. And they wanted it to be like, don't hold back, show us, like, we want to see where we have challenges, where we have, so this is the full chart, not just the sun sign. So we're seeing what's the rising sign. So a rising sign is, what energy do you immediately show people?
Right.
Before you even speak. Your sun sign is going to be how your identity comes through in its full focused projection. That's your sun sign. Your moon is very, very important. It is, what do you need emotionally? And so when you figure out what people need emotionally, which is going to impact how they express themselves.
Right.
So let's use myself as an example.
Okay.
My sun's in Aquarius, but my moon's in Cancer, which is very sensitive. So secretly, this big guy is really sensitive underneath.
Right.
So my Aquarian sun sometimes may seem more detached, which may make me seem insensitive, but it may sometimes just be a method of protection.
Interesting.
Because I don't want to get hurt.
Right.
So when we understand these dynamics in not just a family, but a workplace.
Absolutely.
Mercury is, how do we communicate? So somebody has their Mercury in Aries and they're always so abrupt and you seem so combative because Mercury in Aries is the god of war. So a person who communicates through the lens of Aries is going to be more direct to the point because we're trying to get things done.
Right.
And that person who has Mercury in Pisces is more sensitive. Well, it's the way you said it. It hurt, So
right.
All these dynamics, it's an encyclopedia of information to have.
That is very interesting because I would say helping others try to find positions, I would say a lot of companies are using something like this, but they call it something else to try and see what personality you are, how well you'll receive certain type of instruction. And they are really valuing that information in the process of the hiring. And so for you to coincide with that and for you to work with businesses on that, did you see a lot of return on that group you just helped on their camaraderie within the group?
Well, it was just maybe a week or two ago that we did the reading. So we're yet to see how they incorporate the information.
Right.
But she did leave a stellar review. So they and just their reaction during the reading, like, oh my God, like
things they didn't even know.
That's me or that's him. And maybe he doesn't want to recognize what you're saying, but we know the stuff you're describing, that's him.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was almost like an awakening for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mentioned to you earlier that I'm a Pisces. So I am curious, how do you figure out that moon sign?
So great question. 3 things are necessary to cast a chart. We need to know the location of your birth. Of course, we need the date of your birth and the exact time.
Exact time.
And when we have those 3, we are able to calculate your actual birth chart.
Interesting.
And that will show you where the sun's at, where the moon is, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. And then there are other bodies that we're looking at too, like asteroids. But the main 10 planets from the sun to Pluto, we can see where they're placed. And we'll see how they are communicating.
Interesting.
So this is where math comes in. So I lost interest in math after geometry.
Right.
Thank God for geometry because that's a lot what astrology is based on.
Oh, okay.
So it's angles. So if you have planets that are 90 degrees away from each other, that's stress. So think of it as you got a deadline at work. Everybody's kind of tense. It's like, we got to get this thing done. That's what a square is like in the chart.
Interesting.
So when those planets are at those aspects, then we feel a degree of angst around what those planets represent.
Right.
So it's just things, and so
you really need somebody that's proficient like you in this to really tell you what you are, not the pop readings, Yeah. There's a lot behind this, it seems like. I would have never guessed math was involved, ever. But with your research as well, understanding what they've done in the past, what they're doing now seems very important. It feels like you're really helping people.
Yeah. And just to if you don't mind, I'm going to back up too.
Go ahead.
Back to working with businesses.
Yeah.
I had another lady in North Carolina she has a yoga studio, and she was looking for the right time to sell the other studio, and she was trying to sell it, I think. And so there's an aspect of astrology called forecasting and electional astrology. Now, this is what affects the pockets.
Okay.
So when is the best time to make a business move? There are so in the chart you have houses. So there are 12 houses, and these are 12 compartments. Like you all have these different rooms.
Right.
Or certain rooms are designated for Advent Trinity.
Absolutely.
Certain rooms for Jenkins or such. And so each house they have designations. So one house deals with your identity. Another one deals with your resources. One deals with communication, commuting, and things so you walk through the whole 12 houses. So you use that with certain planets and how they're aspecting each other, and we can decide when is the best time to move forward with a business deal.
Wow.
So
that's incredible.
Yeah.
And obviously you've been doing this for 5 years. So there's some fact behind how you're helping these people.
Oh, yeah. When people got hundreds of thousands of dollars tied up and you're sweating bullets like, oh, boy, let me double check all my, okay, Mars is rising at this time, so yeah.
They see value in it.
Yeah.
What would you say for personal gain or interest do most of your clients come to you for? Not as a business, but as just a person. What would you say is their main request of you?
I love your questions. The ancients left us a very simple statement, and it was, man, know thyself. And the man was not based on gender. It was based on humanity. This is what your job is when you come here, is to know who you are.
Right.
And most people are trying to figure out who they are. Now, they may come because it's a marriage breakup on the horizon. They may come because they're lonely or there's a health issue. But when we get into the session, ultimately what they're looking for is, who am I?
Right.
And that's the biggest gift that I think it holds, is it gives you insight into who you, because how can I love myself if I don't know who I am? How can I love what I don't know?
Right. And who's to really say that who you think you are is really who you are if you're wearing a mask?
Exactly. Yeah. How can someone else love me? How can I get along with anybody if I don't know who I'm actually bringing to them to relate to?
That part. And that's a huge part. I would consider what you do as almost a therapy. For me, it would be anyway. To understand me and my partner and my coworkers would be a huge awakening for me anyway. And I would think for anyone else that you help. So what services are you currently offering? Like on your website, how are you addressing this to people? What can they go on there and find that would benefit them as a business or a personal?
Well, the initial reading that everyone should have is a birth chart reading.
Okay.
And that is, it makes it takes a look at your special moment. And your special moment is when you took your first breath and that snapshot of the heavens. So what we're doing, we're catching the clock at that moment. And the clock keeps moving, but we caught that moment on the cosmic clock, and it's you.
Wow.
So everyone should have an understanding of that, their individual cosmic clock. So that's that.
So there's a sequence and a process to this. You can't just jump in anywhere. You need to have that understanding. You would suggest it.
So, yeah, I suggest it. Some people come and they just want to go right to a relationship reading, which is called synastry.
Okay.
So, and synastry just means same star. And so they want to come and see how they relate to each other. But what I'll normally do, if they're not already a client, I'm going to give them a little Reader's Digest version of each person's chart first. Then I'm going to show them how they impact each other through the synastry. So that's for relationship. Synastry also works out in businesses. How does Story relate to Cindy?
Right.
So we'll put Story's chart in the middle, and we'll see how Cindy impacts Story. Then we'll put Cindy's chart in the middle, and we'll see how Story impacts Cindy.
Wow. That's almost a great tool for when you're having struggles within your employees, to understand what one personality is versus the other personality that are currently not meshing well.
Right.
It's almost like a little sneak peek into the secrets behind it all.
Right.
Great.
You got a forecast reading that I have. That's something I'm really excited about because it's the 2025 forecast reading.
That's what your upcoming projects are, you mentioned earlier. I wanted to ask you about that. So what does that entail?
It's a lot. It's a longer reading.
Okay.
But what we're looking at is where does the major ingresses. So ingress is when I walked and crossed that threshold into this room, I made an ingress. I walked into this room. So the ingresses represent when a planet walks into a new sign.
Okay.
So the major ones would be like the outer planets like Neptune, Pluto, and Uranus. So when they move into a new sign, we look at things like that. We look at retrogrades. Retrogrades represent when a planet appears to be moving backwards, but they don't. But because we are governed by symbolism on this earth, when that planet appears to be moving backwards, and here's proof how you can check it. When Mercury's retrograde, you will have issues with your internet. You will have issues with connectivity and like all this stuff we have in here. You may maybe your mic starts buzzing or whatever, because what's happening is Mercury is closer to the earth when it's retrograde. So its signal gets louder and its archetypal energy gets stronger, and Mercury governs communication.
Wow.
So to us, when it appears to be moving backwards, it has an actual electromagnetic effect on the happenings on this planet.
That is incredible. As your marketing company, if you could give us a little insight when that's happening, I think it would be really beneficial for us.
Right.
But no, that is amazing because there are certain energies that, just affect things. You see it in your day-to-day. Someone's energy from themselves or a device can change everything about you. So it all lines up and makes sense.
Right.
And now I'm going to be watching Mercury to see when my computer breaks what's going on, really.
Right.
Man, that's incredible. So what would you say is one piece of advice you would give to any entrepreneur that's trying to dive into an industry where there's a lot of skepticism in?
Any industry, just based on my philosophy of how I approach life, is don't go into it looking for money first. You got to be passionate about what you're doing. And people can feel passion, and they can feel when you're dispassionate. And if you're passionate about what you do and you're seeking mastery, cream will rise to the top eventually. So you got to be willing to endure, but you also have to be intelligent about how you move. Partner with people who can help you advance. So strategic partnerships are important.
Yes.
But be passionate and be sincere and have some intestinal fortitude.
Absolutely. The authenticity, I said, that you exude when you walk in a room, it's an invaluable thing you have.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So if anyone wants to reach out, wants to get a reading, or just learn more about you, how can they reach you? What outlets can they find you on?
Well, my site is 720astrology.com.
Okay. The number 720.
Yes, 720
Gotcha.
astrology.com. My email is info@720astrology.com.
Okay.
And those are the two best ways to connect with me. I do have an Instagram at 720astrology.com. I don't do well with being as social as I should be, so I'm working on that.
Right.
Posting stuff, but I do check my emails, and like I said, I have a robust website that I'm proud of. So
you're welcome, and thank you. I know for Atia especially, you're one of our favorite clients because of just who you are, and so thank you for being amazing and for coming on the show today. And I look forward to maybe having you on the podcast again later in the year to see what all turned out for you.
I would love it.
Great, thank you, Jamal. And to all our listeners out there, I'm your host, Story, and we'll see you next time on Market It with Alma.